Hello, friends and extended family. How are you doing today? Uh, Today, I want to do a little thought experiment. And this thought experiment is to help people to see beyond themselves and their break from their personal perspective into a what if scenario. Now, at one time there was a show, and I forget what show it was. Maybe like The Outer Limits or um, The Twilight Zone, something like that. And there was a box. I think they actually ended up making a movie about it. And a guy shows up at a woman's door with a box, and it's got a glass lid, I believe, and a button underneath. And he says, I will leave this box with you for 24 hours. Now I'm paraphrasing, and it's been a while since I've seen it, but here's the essence of what it is. And if you press the button, you will receive, I think it was $1 million at the time, but the amount of money is enough to be life changing and possibly solve all your material problems. So the conditions of pressing the button meant that if they pressed the button, they'd receive this huge sum of money, and somewhere in the world, someone they did not know, will never hear of, will die. Okay, so then the box is left with them to consider this. Now, given if someone has not found a way to become who they are intrinsically and are susceptible to outside forces and have a investment in the outside reality of children and bills and all the demands that come with being involved in society and life and whatnot. Well, that becomes fairly difficult. What if you're facing foreclosure on your home? What if you're struggling to feed your children? What if? And yet, as a main tenet to most religions, thou shalt not murder is important. And I think anyone, with empathy at all, in any way, shape, or form, abhors the idea of taking another human life. And of course, there are some that don't care. They put down their care and live a different paradigm than a lot of us, um, lacking in empathy, perhaps. So then, what ends up happening? Okay, so the people can only think of themselves throughout this process, and their attention is focused on something, and logic and reason, higher logic and reason, have not blessed them with sort of a meta understanding. And when I say meta, it just means outside of, right? Metaphysics is the physics of outside what we consider to be the whole of reality. Is there an outside of that? An inside? Is there something beyond it? That's metaphysics. And if a person spends enough time contemplating the meta, well, certain understandings and certain ideas will start to coalesce, and it will start to form patterns. And this is where things like the Magna Carta would come from in people contemplating and meditating on these things. And we try to come to this with a sense of care, in that if I have a perspective and a consciousness that feels, hurts, um, becomes confused, can feel love, hatred, all these things, and I'm aware of this thing that's happening for me, then empathy suggests that it's also happening for others, although we cannot prove that. I think, therefore I am. I cannot think within you. But my imagination perhaps has that capability to provide some answers, some empathy, right? And empathy, and that's sort of where that comes from. So I'm sort of talking and confusing myself because it's very complex material. But anyway, so the point being, the guy comes back. They have pressed the button. He gives them their money, and he says, "And now I need the box." And they get the money, excited. And I'm not 100% sure how this part goes, but I think someone asked the guy, now that they've got their money, they've been focused in on this thing, ignoring ignoring the meta of the situation. And now the question occurs to them, well, what are you going to do with that box now that we press the button? He says, clicks the thing, resets it. He says, I'm going to take this box and offer it to people that don't know you, will never know you, and will have no knowledge of you. And he leaves. So now, all of a sudden, the golden rule comes back and presents itself to these people. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. Because now it has occurred to these people that someone else that they don't know and don't know them and have no reason to give a shit about them are going to be presented the box and potentially the same offer of a huge sum of money that can change their lives for the better. But someone else that they don't know, like them, is going to be killed. So, this thought experiment provides us with the ultimate do unto others as we would have done unto us, and is a basis for true and ultimate justice and transcendence from our mundaneness, from our selfishness, that allows our conscience to move forward unfettered by guilt and doubt, that we can move forward in certainty and surety that we're doing the right thing. So the reason I bring this up is that it applies to adoption in a big way, right? That if we are going to send our creation, our procreation, out into the world, we really need to think, right? We really need more information. And if that information is going to be cut off from us for at least 18 years, that we will have no way of knowing what's happened to that child or that consciousness or what's happening to that consciousness, how can we move forward normally with full certainty that we have not condemned a consciousness to pure and utter hell? And in knowing that most adoptees are going to suffer increased events of suicide, increased events of incarceration, mental issues, psychological intervention, incarceration, I think I mentioned. If we know that, if we know that to do this thing, we are going to put a consciousness in a much more difficult environment and situation, causing statistically many more of those people to go through hell, then what do we need to do to move forward? We need to justify what we've done, I think. And given the difficulty of removing ourselves from our own selfish position, and especially a young woman put in that situation who doesn't have perhaps the philosophy, moral education, and wisdom presented through these types of thought experiments to help them see that, oh, I need to think bigger when I'm affecting others by my actions. Well, you can see the problem, and you can see the dilemma that these people are put into. Because given the scenario of the box, and we can all say, I would never kill another person for my own selfish things. That's virtue signaling. But until you are presented with that scenario, it's very hard to say what we will do. And that brings up fear for ourselves. It brings up fear that maybe we're not strong enough. Maybe we're not good people. And if you're questioning that, well, that at least shows that you have the potential to be good people. If you are certain that you're good people and you tell everyone that how good of the people you are, the chances are that you're not as good as you think you are. And even myself, if I believe that I should not murder another person or kill another person, and I'm presented with the ultimate dilemma in that someone's holding a gun to my head and saying, either you kill this person, whether it be your child or your spouse. I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios people put out there for thought experiments, or which of your children is going to die, or etc., etc., etc. It is hard to really understand the nature of reality, because we're sort of kept in a sort of infantile state, I find, in modern large society. And we are sort of curtailed in developing maturity and meta knowledge to keep us focused on selfish matters and consuming. But I think this is an important thought exercise to help someone understand the meta, right? In that the butterfly effect, if you will, in that your actions ripple. And if you are unconscious of these sort of ideas, it's going to be very hard to make rational, sane decisions. I know from experience, you know, when you get focused on a want, a need, you know, you're put in situations that are beyond your capacities, beyond your understandings, beyond your education. It's hard. And in some ways, that's why exoteric religion, and personally, I gravitate more towards esoteric, which is changing the inner. And you know, it's a complex discussion that I barely I can't teach it to you because I'm trying to learn it myself. Um, but mystical, religious, philosophical discussion and study is good to try to establish who you believe yourself to be and how to be better and grow. So, so ultimately, what I'm saying is that we need to all give everyone sort of the benefit of the doubt to some degree, while at the same time keeping a certain amount of boundaries so that we're not completely vulnerable to bad actors, people who put down care and have decided that the only thing is their self-interest and everything else be damned, literally be damned, right? Because that's what happens when people put down the care and put down the golden rule of do unto others. They put it down for their own selfishness, and it only spreads like a virus, right? The pandemic that seems to be, to me, a superbug, which doesn't appear to have increased 2020's death rate versus 2019. It simply moved its numbers around. Um, and if we hadn't made a big deal about the coronavirus, it would have been, you know, the same sort of mentality as the H1N1 or whatever. People die from pathogens. But as we can see very clearly, there's other pathogens being passed around um, in the mental sphere, affecting the mental health of the West, demoralizing it, and hatred and anger and anxiety being spread through it, divisiveness, and it's very clear to see where it's coming from. If tomorrow I went to, you know, Timbuktu, not the real place, if there is such a place, which I think there is, but some imaginary land, and there was a group of people that lived there, and there was a bunch of other people that had come from other cultures and societies, and the group of people that lived there, you know, that was their home. They built it. They had, you know, established themselves longer. And the people that had come from other scenarios decided that they should have all those things and that they didn't have as much clout in the community of these people, right? Like say for example, you know, maybe Japan. Japan seems to have a lot of Japanese people and, you know, some few outliers. But if my goal is to make the most amount of people satisfied and happy, well, then I have to cater to that majority that built that community and is based on their values and belief systems and whatnot. And the outliers, well, when things go bad, well, unfortunately, they're going to be the last to receive sustenance, right? Because they're not actually that culture. They may be integrated and initiated into it and become part of it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if they're going to remain outliers with their own separate beliefs and values and that go against the main culture, well, if I went into that culture and started attacking them, saying, no, 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 your ways are wrong. Your ways that allowed this place to be where people can come and receive sustenance at is wrong, and the people that came from wherever they came from with their ideas and had to leave, apparently, their place of sustenance and homes, that it should be like them. Everything should be catered to them. But why did these people leave their places of sustenance to begin with? To come to this place of sustenance that seemed to be sustaining the core group and seemingly providing sustenance to others that come and aren't receiving it where they're coming from. Does this make sense? Do we understand this? And you can jump around and point out past mistake and utilize that to condemn someone or some people or whatever till the end of time if you want to. But then you should expect the same in return. So if you attack some people for one thing, and then they turn around at some point and say, you know what, hold on a sec. What have you done? Oh my goodness. And then if you took a look at the outliers and say they were criminals or they were this or that, or maybe they were communist subverts, and you discover that these communists have come into your country with the idea not only to destroy your place of sustenance for those people, you want to destroy those people, and on top of that, you want to claim this sustenance hole for the sustenance hole you're coming from. That's warfare. That's how that works. And if you discover enemy combatants in your culture, what should you do with them? They're trying to destroy the people that you're there to govern and lead. What should you do with those outliers that are trying to destroy those people that you're in charge of governing? What should you do with a leader who sells himself out to the other country and starts dismantling the place of sustenance for those people? It's called treason. And we do, historically, I think anyone knows what the penalties for those people would be. So I guess what I'm saying is I think people are waking up to this reality that's going on. And I would think some of those outliers who are bad actors and are there for the express purpose of subversion, demoralization, crisis, and normalization, the active measures warfare, I would think they'd be cluing in and waking up to the fact that their gig is almost up. And if they're discovered, well, they're traitors committing the crime of treason, or just, foreign agents. And I think when the host body wakes up and sees that their governance isn't doing anything about it, well, I guess they would be treasonous traitors too. Right? And I think as adoptees, something that I haven't checked yet, but common sense tells me that somewhere around the time that adoption began, some other inhumanitarian practice ended. And it seems to me it was slavery. And some will tell you there's nothing new under the sun. And I believe there's something to that saying. And if there's nothing new under the sun, what is adoption? Is adoption not something new? So if it isn't new, then what exactly is it? So I'll leave that with you to answer, and I'd love to hear from you folks. And the other thing that I've started doing as well is I've started paying attention to some people who have blogs from former countries from behind the Iron Curtain who have lived through and in communist society. And they have some information that's very relevant about what's going on right now in the West. And I suggest you seek these people out and hear what they have to say about what's going on. And then ask yourselves why we're not hearing this coming out of our academia, because it's very useful information in understanding what communism is, how it comes to be, and what you can expect if it ever comes to your town.